Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of History Sparkle, the set of videos where I provide an historical context around a certain historical period or certain literature masterpiece. Today, we're talking about the American Revolution. Are you ready? So, shall we go? The American Revolution is a key fact in history for many reasons. First, for example, is that it gave birth to one of the most powerful countries in Western world. Second, it was the first colony to get independence from Britain. It wasn't immediate and it didn't come out from the blue, but it had a long genesis that we are trying to explain in this video. I think we can say that the main reason was war. In 1754 up to 1763, England fought war with France and Indians, which left England in a big difficulties for provision. That's when King George III reinforced taxes on the colonies without their consent. The colonists were used to have goods without taxes, so obviously this measure created dissatisfaction among the colonists. It wasn't only these new taxes that lit the sparkle of revolution. The situation for the colonists was very unfair, especially under the perspective of trade. The colonies were now strong enough to make and produce many goods of every sort, but the trade was controlled by England. There was a list of products that could only be exported to the UK, freezing the possibility of growing for the colonies. The Navigation Act, passed by the Parliament in 1651, was primarily issued to hinder the Dutch, the biggest rival of England in trade. It was an expansion of what Henry VIII had passed, English goods on English vessels. But now, in 1651, there was English goods and goods from the colonies on English vessels, resulting in the fact that goods from the colony could only be shipped to England or Ireland or another English colony. These acts were benefiting only British merchants. So, after a longer period of neglect, the colonies saw a series of acts coming from the Parliament, suddenly exploiting them with the aim of reinforcing England, and they started to feel that the Crown didn't consider them as British, but as something different and less important. Additionally to the Navigation Act, there was Wool Act in 1699, which prohibited colonists from exporting wool and wool products. Hat Act in 1732 prevented Americans to export their manufactured hat, a piece of clothing that was very fashionable at the time. Iron Act in 1750. It suppressed the manufacture of finished iron goods in the colonies. That means that they could only be produced in England. An edict produced in 1773 prevented colonials and colonials' governments to buy land and make contracts with natives. Only the British Empire had the privilege to do so. Sugar Act in 1764, heavy taxes on sugar, which also impacted the rum business. Stamp Act in 1765, taxes on newspapers and pamphlets. Quartering Act in 1765. It stated that British troops could be housed in colonist barracks, and if they were too small, they could occupy inns. The Americans disliked the idea of having British soldiers on their land and amongst them so bad that they refused to comply. This is the first sign ever of rebellion. Colonies were starting to elect people who were against the British power, such as Patrick Henry, elected as a member of the Virginia House of Legislators. The British response to the non-compliance to the Quartering Act arrived quickly. The Declaratory Act was issued in 1766, and it stated that the British had the right to make British law compulsory to the colonies. A group of laws in 1777, called the Townshend Acts, imposed taxes on products imported by the colonists, such as lead, glass, tea and paper. Taxes seemed never-ending. up to 1773, when the Tea Act was issued, which permitted to the British East India Company to sell tea at a lower price, with the aim to discourage the buying of tea produced in the colonies. We know the strategy. When buying lemons from South Africa is cheaper than buying lemons from Sicily in Sorrento at our supermarket. On December 16, in 1773, a group of American patriots, disguised as Native Americans, assaulted a vessel from the East India Company and threw 342 chests of tea into the sea. We call this event the Boston Tea Party, and it's a symbol of the American Revolution. Please note down that they dressed as Mohawk Indian because they considered themselves American and not British, but still, they considered America's land not derived of the natives. In response to the Boston Tea Party, the British government issued a bunch of laws called the Intolerable Act, which included Boston Port Act. The port of Boston was closed on June 1st, 1774, until it displayed proper respect for the British authority. Massachusetts government, which restructured the Massachusetts government by giving more power to the royally appointed, the people who were chosen by the king to govern Massachusetts. Administration of Justice Act, ensuring a fair trial to British officials charged with capital offences while suffocating protests in Massachusetts. Fair trial as found not guilty for sure. Quebec Act. Quebec was settled by the French, but after the French and Indian War it was property of the British Empire in 1774. The Quebec Act was stated to provide protection for the Roman Catholic faith. If you're wondering what's the meaning of this and what does it have to do with Intolerable Acts, it was just issued to ensure the French loyalty to the British Crown. In response to the Intolerance Act, in October 1774, the First Continental Congress met. It was formed by representatives of the colonies elected by the colonists themselves. It's the starting point of a new government non-dependent from the British Crown. It created the Continental Association, and it had the aim to reinforce the colony's economy against the British troops. Soon, the feeling that the war was inevitable rose among the colonists, and in 1775, on April 19, the Battle of Lexington and Concord gave way to the American Revolution. While battles between English troops and Americans were fought, the colonies started to move politically. The Congress asked the states to write their own constitution, and by June 1775, 9 colonies were ready for independence. The 4 remaining colonies, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New York, and Maryland, followed soon after. On June 11, 1776, a commission was formed with the aim to find justification to be separated from Great Britain. On July 2nd, the Congress voted for independence. Thomas Jefferson drafted the Declaration of Independence, and it was accepted by the Congress on July 4th. A new nation was born, and it was called the United States of America. The Congress then composed a new constitution accepted by all the representatives of the states on November 15, 1777. The Continental Congress was then dissolved and reinstituted as the government of the United States of America. Anyway, the British were not so inclined to draw back easily, although they probably made a big mistake. England underestimated the revolution and considered it just a revolt from some rebels. They thought they could easily gain back power and reduce the colony into obedience. Nevertheless, in the following years, many battles were fought, some won by the British and some won by the Americans, with the consistent fact that Britain refused to recognize the Declaration of Independence. The Battle of Saratoga gave General Washington time to gather again the Continental Army, while the British Army was sieged in Philadelphia for 2 months in 1777. In the meantime, England had enemies also in Europe, and the first one was France. By allying with the United States, France became the first country to recognize the Declaration of Independence in 1778. Thinking that they would find more consent in the south, where migrants were still fresh from Britain, Britain headed to south and retreated the army from the states of the north. Also because Britain had to protect their colonies in the Caribbean, that it was now the main producer of sugar. Heading south, the British Army took control of the Georgian coastline, but only a few loyalists came, and they were now forced to move toward hinterland, Virginia and North Carolina, with a very weak army. On October 19, 1781, the siege of Yorktown finally signed the surrender of the British Army, as both the Continental Army and the French Army had won against the British. Finally, on September 3, 1783, the Treaty of Paris was signed by the British representative and the representative of the United States to put an end to the War of the American Revolution. As Spain and the Netherlands were also at war with England, the treaty also established peace between Great Britain and the allied nations of France. Seeing how the US are powerful now, it's no doubt that the American Revolution is a milestone in history for our modern world. What we sometimes forget to look at is that what happened after. First, the saddest thing is that a lot of slaves were encouraged to enlist and fight from both the British Army and the Continental Army, with the promise of freedom, but in reality they all went back to their original state of slavery. Second, although for Britain losing the American colonies was a big failure, British global power continued to increase thanks to the Industrial Revolution. Then, the country that suffered the most was France. Helping the Americans cost to France so much money that the country had a huge hole in budget that later led to disorder which exploded in the French Revolution. Nevertheless, the genesis of a country is always fascinating, and in this case, it's also easy to understand as the colonies weren't exactly wrong. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you like it, please give it a thumb up. If you want to see more videos about history and literature, please you can subscribe to the channel. Remember, we are a language school. We are just outside Milan. We teach English, French, Spanish and Italian for foreigners. We teach adults as well as teenagers, and we deliver lessons online as well in person. If you want to follow us on social media, this is our Facebook page. This is our Instagram page. This is our email address. You can write to us and ask any question that you want about history or about literature or about English classes. Since this is the first History Sparkle of the year, I also seize the occasion to wish you a very happy new year, and I hope to see you soon with another Literature Snacks. Bye bye!